So we're talking about CTE, and Rashid, you had an excellent question. What was it again?
So can you detect the presence of the brain trauma in living subjects? So do you have to wait until, as in the case of Dave Dorson or Junior Seau, for those individuals to be deceased before you can do the study to verify that it exists? Is it possible to do it in living subjects?
Yeah.
I think right now the main hallmark of the CTE diagnosis is at autopsy, but I've seen presented some very interesting data that's really trying to look more, let's take a step back, but actually how to diagnose a concussion through imaging studies instead of just a clinical, history taking and exam. And there's some interesting studies as technology improves, particularly in neuroimaging with MRIs. There may be a way where we can map the injury to the brain and perhaps have a way to follow that and subsequently in later stages be able to identify the presence of the injury. I would put, though, that the focus of concussion is just like obesity, that it's about prevention. And as interesting as that is, I think our time and efforts have to be dedicated to prevention.
Yeah. So, and I think that really centers around this notion of technology and what can technology do. I know we talked about this a little earlier, but we have to figure out a way to really put forth measures of prevention like you're talking about. Changing the sports, changing what we wear, changing how we wear. You'd mentioned some things about, even some certain sports bulkier kind of equipment, right? Because potentially there'd be ways to stop that. But I'm hopeful in that way. I really am. Are you aware of anything else that around that? I know you mentioned that earlier.
No, but just as the technology, the materials change, and then better ways to engineer these helmets or these mouth guards come about, you're going to obviously be able to reduce the amount of impact and design these devices better. Like you were saying with sensors also, if you know that if you eventually have a helmet that's well designed, protects the head well, and also can monitor the amount of impact, and it was looked like it was a big hit, but it was minor, then you don't worry as much about having had a concussion, and vice versa. If you thought it was minor, but then the gauge says, hey, you know what, this was pretty heavy impact. Let's monitor this case. I think that's going to only help the situation.
Which I think is very, very important at the professional level and the college level. But then you think about kids again, and you mentioned this sort of development of kids. And I've read somewhere that a kid at the age of 4 or 5, their head is pretty much almost developed to the size of an adult. Like it's like the bobblehead phenomenon that kids' heads grow and then their bodies grow to follow
Catch
it.
up, yeah.
So if that is in fact the case, will we ever have enough technology to deal with that issue? And maybe, once again, maybe we're looking at the end of contact sports for children. Is that where this is headed?
I like to think not. I think, again, making the sport as safe as possible. I'm really excited, as I said earlier, about Pop Warner and seeing how the sport is played, and if it's played to the same level and satisfaction with limited contact and training. Because most of the injuries we see, even on the orthopedic side, tremendous number of those are overuse injuries. It's the repetition that really contributes to the severity of the injury. That's been the major concern, I think, with CTE, is that it's not just one major hit, it's the cumulative effect. So maybe we'll get to the point where we will see limits in heading in soccer, or things like that, anything that has a potential for head contact, that the training's going to be different.
But as I had mentioned earlier, soccer and the basketball not having helmets. I don't know if you all remember the day when hockey, it wasn't mandatory to wear helmets. And when I started watching again recently, now everybody has to wear a helmet and also a shield. But I remember back in the 70s, you didn't have to. Remember, there were many players that didn't have helmets on at all. So why not have that for baseball? Why not? I mean, for basketball. Why not have that for soccer?
And you mentioned sports that hockey, thinking about football, everything about thinking about boxing as well, which we haven't really talked about. These are sports that the more violent they are, the more exciting they are.
Sure.
And we're really, once again, we're talking about changing the culture of them, which I think is huge. It's a huge sea change.
And to the point of prevention, let's teach how to play the sport correctly. When I was a child and I was taught to tackle, you were taught to tackle with your shoulder, not to tackle with your head first. And so even those very simple preventative measures can go a long way.
Yeah,
Thank you all very much. We are out of time. Kid, thank you so much.
You're welcome.